And Carol appearing at the Hope Jazz Festival all over this weekend. Lots of good bands lined up to take part in that. All right then, our next guest, my friends, is in the insurance business in England. And he has troubles. Because he is a tall man. I'm talking tall here. I mean, I'm really talking tall. And he has spent his life either ducking and diving or bumping his head against things. So much so that he has helped to form, an association in England for tall people. And he's in town this weekend hoping to encourage other tall people in Ireland to form their own tall club and become affiliated. Would you welcome, please, Phil Heinrichsey. Three people from Ireland who are dead set to become members of the club. Would you welcome them too, please? Robert, Dara, and Shaun. Oh, give over, will you? It's not very nice standing here with all these guys around me. It gives you feelings of inadequacy. So it does. Oh, you think it's funny, do you? You're very amused, are you? All right, let's see you do it then. Come up here. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Up here, stand there, turn around. Look up, it's Aer Lingus. That took the smile off your face. I'll pop it away. You're beautiful. Not very funny. Hiya. Phil, what height are you?
I'm a mere 6'8".
6'8". What weight are you?
About 13 stone.
Size shoes?
12.
Robert, what height are you?
I'm 6'6".
What weight are you?
11 stone.
Size shoes?
11.
11. How are you? You're Dara.
That's right.
What height are you, Dara?
6'8".
6'8". Weight?
About 14 stone.
Size shoes?
12.
Very good. Shaun?
Hi.
What height are you?
6'11".
6'11". What weight?
16 stone.
Size shoes?
16.
16. God's sake, come up and sit down here. You sit in the guest seat there, and you take your seats there, boys. Dear, we want to talk to them about the vicissitudes of being so tall. It is a very, very serious business. Now, Phil, what prompted you to set up the association?
Well, basically, the thing that happened when we all met out front earlier on, namely that we immediately started exchanging information about where do you get such and such, and how do you manage for so-and-so, and I just figured that all tall people had a little bit of information about where to get certain things, and it just made sense to get all the information together into one place and make it available to all tall people.
What difficulties with clothes, for example, do you?
Well, clothes is just one example. Clothes, shoes, that sort of thing. But then it sort of moves on from there to everyday items, things like kitchen units, beds, and so forth. I mean, where do you get a 7-foot bed without being, well, effectively ripped off for an awful lot of money?
Well, what do you do about beds? When you're staying in hotels or anything like that, what do you do?
I always ask for a double room, and I sleep across the corners of a double bed. It's the only way.
What about you, Robert? What do you do?
You just have to sleep diagonally in a bed. What I did about 2 or 3 years ago was I just gave up, made my own bed, and then recently bought a bed from a tall man who had extended it. But it's hard to find.
What happened to him?
Oh, he bought himself another bed and extended that.
See. What do you do, Dara?
I'm afraid I have to do the same thing. I've recently moved into a house in the last couple of years, and I had to buy a bed. But again, like Phil, I sleep diagonally. It's the only way I can fit in it.
What about you?
Well, I put a small table at the end of my bed. I put a pillow on it.
A small table, end of bed, put a pillow on it. Yeah. I see. What about driving cars? Talk to me about that. What about cars?
Just can't get my legs in under the steering wheel. I think that the only thing I'd be able to fit into would be a Land Rover, especially if it's customised.
Yes. Well, what about the rest of you, Dara?
It's very difficult to get cars. I mean, I think that I tried recently. I've got a fairly new car, but I tried several models, some of which I liked from the advertising and such like, but there were really only 2 I could fit into, and one of those I was told I'd fit into only if they extended the rails behind the seat, so I'd effectively be driving from the boot.
It was a Morris Minor I had once, and no third gear. It was impossible. There was just no third gear. I had to drive it with no third gear because my knee was jammed in there. It was impossible.
I see.
Well, I mean, let's face it, with most cars for us guys, it's not so much a matter of you getting into the car as putting it on. Because, I mean, this effectively happened with recovering an MG Midget one time for a friend of mine. It had a flat battery, and I picked it up. I had to put the soft... An MG Midget. Now, this was fun, because I had to take the soft top down, sit on the back of the driver's seat, put my foot on the clutch pedal, and then lower myself onto into the seat whilst keeping my foot on the clutch pedal. Because if it came off, that was it. I just couldn't get my foot back onto the clutch, so I had to knock it out of gear, coast to a stop, and much to the amusement of passers-by, climb back up on the back of the driver's seat and slide down again. And getting out was a whole lot of fun. A whole lot of fun.
What about trousers and suits and that sort of thing? What happens to you?
It's possible to buy them off the rack. I know I'm in a type of job where I don't need to wear suits that much, and I wear casual clothes, so therefore I wear a lot of jeans. But usually, if I'm trying to get jeans here in Dublin, I look for the biggest leg they have, biggest length of leg, and hope that they've got an odd one in the consignment, and that's 1 inch extra. But that's really the only way I can get it. Otherwise, I have to get them elsewhere.
Like where? Do you have to travel?
Well, I have connections in Canada that can get them.
Big clothes, yeah. What do you do, Shaun?
My clothes.
You what?
Go to London.
You have to go to London?
Yeah.
What, to a specially tall shop or something?
Yeah, there's a couple of shops called the High and Mighty. I know.
And they cope with you alone, do they?
Well, there's actually quite a good few tall people in England. It's not rare as it is over here.
Yeah, I see. Okay, let's go through all the gags then that people make at your expense that you've heard 9,000 million times before, and they all think they're the very first. Let's have a go.
Well, I've actually got a complete list of them because the club that we set up,
yes.
we publish the Tall Persons Club directory,
yes.
And contained in that is a section, the 25 answers to old jokes, starting with the old favourite, of course, what's the weather like up there? Is it cold up there? Do you have trouble with low-flying aircraft? No, not if I keep my legs together. I bet you've got your head in the clouds. I bet you don't use a rest playing snooker, do you? Did your mother put you in a grow bag? Were you a giraffe in a previous life? Have you guys got any that you'd like to throw in?
Yeah, yes.
People always said about me, his mother said he wouldn't be long.
This goes to show how wrong you can be, doesn't it?
Yes. What about other ones?
No, people are always saying, you should be a basketball player or a policeman, things like that.
Yeah.
Of course. Actually, talking about the basketball player joke, I was in a wine bar in London about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and a chap actually looked at me and said, do you play basketball? And he was, bearing in mind, he was only about 5'7". I looked at him and said, no, why? Do you play miniature golf?
Okay, and people in pubs and so on.
It starts, and the strange thing is as well, I don't know how you guys find it, but at school I was always bullied. Yeah. Because being taller than average, you're different, so you're an obvious target for the bullies. Now the thing is, if you hit the guy back, yes. You are then told, pick on someone your own size. Yes. If he floors you, that's great, because then he's big and butch and macho, and that sort of destroys your confidence as you go through your teenage years and into your early 20s. And then, of course, what happens when you start socializing, you get into a pub social environment, the guy who actually picks the fight is going to be about 5'5", determined to prove what a big man he is, and he's going to pick on the big guys like us. And the number of fights I've had to talk my way out of, purely and simply because some guy had to prove himself.
And but how does he get at you at your height? I mean, how does a guy at that height get at you? It's up a number, isn't it?
It usually starts off with, I suppose you think you're big, huh? Well, it's kind of obvious I'm big, isn't it? And then, I suppose you think you're hard. Well, no, not particularly. So don't forget, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And then, of course, the fatal thing is I cannot keep my big mouth shut. I always say, but don't forget, the smaller they are, the further they go, And that is usually the invitation, like, come on outside, pal, and all the rest of it.
All of that. Now, on a serious note, how does it affect your health, if at all?
Well, there's something that I was interested to be able to talk to Phil about backstage, which is I was in my doctor's surgery and I noticed written on my file the words Marfan syndrome, and I asked him what it was, and he said, oh, don't bother yourself about that. And I said, well, no, but I mean, it's on my file, so what is it? And he said, oh, Marfan syndrome, it's just it's a collection of symptoms of things that tall people often have. And he would not give me any information about it. And I went and looked it up in an encyclopedia, in a medical encyclopedia. There was no information. I phoned him back, and he actually told me not to bother myself with this thing. It's very interesting that there is this thing, Marfan syndrome, which applies to a lot of tall, thin people. And there are a range of problems which, it's a genetic problem, and there are a range of problems which we suffer from, which is problems with the joints, problems with the eyes, problems with the colon, problems with the back.
Back problems, I would think, yes, yes. Do you all suffer from back problems? Yes, Shaun, what sort of back problems?
Ducking under tables and chairs and going through, you know, restaurant doors, things like that, buses. Now, the bus ceilings come up to my shoulder. So, just really like the Hunchback of Notre Dame getting onto a bus. And when you sit on the seats, you know, your legs up around like this. And
Buses are well.
Yes, and what about restaurants and places like that, tables?
you have to sort of sit with your legs out around the table, and of course the waiters always trip over them. The people are going out.
When you're in theatres.
Yes, Darren.
I know, like when you're booking, I've been interested in theatre and I go to a lot of theatre, but when you're booking seats, I'm very conscious to say, can I have one in the aisle, please?
Yes.
Because it's very hard on people behind you. I was recently at one of the shows, and there were two women behind me, and I sat down beside another woman who was with me, and I sat down, the woman behind me just said, that's it, it's over for us.
Actually, yeah.
Which I understood, you know,
Yes,
but
of course.
I can do nothing about a bar lying on the seat and looking at the ceiling.
You could sit on the floor, Darren,
That's true.
in the aisle, and then you'd be probably shoved out of that too.
If I may, Guy, I'd just like to pick up again on the medical side of things, because this is something that does get ignored, because so many doctors, so many physicians, they just look at us and sort of say, look, you're big, you're tall, you're healthy, etc. Now, the reason that you're taller than average is because you are healthy. When the fact of the matter is there are a number of syndromes like Marfan syndrome, which in most cases, thankfully, aren't too serious. Some of them bring with them things like behavioral problems, which it would help if the parents were aware of the difficulties that they could be facing, because obviously if you understand what you might be facing, it's easier to deal with. In the case of Marfan syndrome, I mean, it was first diagnosed in 1896. Now, generally speaking, tall people are healthy. Let's get that established. 5% maybe actually have some sort of minor genetic disorder. And in very, very severe cases, and very, very rare cases, I hasten to add, something like Marfan syndrome can actually be life-threatening. Now, Marfan is in fact quite easy to spot if you know what you're looking for. I mean, one of the things, for example, if I close my fist like that, you'll see that my thumb doesn't actually protrude. Because, you see, Marfan actually causes long jointedness. I wonder, would you just show yours? And you'll see that his thumb actually protrudes from his fist. Now that is one of the sort of classic little signs of Marfan syndrome. And really, he should be monitored on a regular basis by a doctor who understands the condition, who knows the condition. I am now able to put him in touch with the Marfan Association over in the UK, who will be able to refer him to a specialist and obviously improve his quality of life enormously.
Very good. What about, do you normally find when you walk into a room, social occasion, you walk into a room, what is generally speaking the reaction?
Silence.
Silence.
It's like them cowboy films. You just walk into a room and everyone's talking suddenly. You know.
Stop.
Exactly.
And then the whispers start.
Yes. Like
But
what?
I don't know. I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know whether it's the same with for Shaun, but I mean, I've learned to actually not stand my full height. You know, I'd say I walk with a crouch, probably to bring myself 2 inches down or whatever it is, because as a result of walking into too many things that are just too low. But also because I'm self-conscious of it. Now, not so much now, but in my younger years, I would have been very self-conscious and would have been made to feel self-conscious about it. But I mean, I'd say normally, we were just talking about this outside as well, when we all met, we all suddenly went up about 3 inches. We're kind of saying, God, he's bigger than me. Usually you stand hunch-shouldered and kind of, you know, look for something to lean on, because I generally would be very self-conscious of standing my full height in
But the other thing is, of course, when you walk into a room full of people, there's this hubbub going on at around about 5'8", 5'10". We're above it. Now, if there's music going on, we're getting the full blast of the music over the top of the audience, you know, or the top of the people that are in there. So we're getting the full blast. So in order to hear what's going on, we actually have to bend down to be able to join into a conversation. Now, if we don't do that, we are then, look at them, looking down their noses at us. I mean, as if we had a choice. I mean, we're up here. Personally, I refuse to apologise for my height. From now on, especially since I've met so many wonderful tall people through starting the club. I mean, we have over 1,100 members now inside 8 months.
1,100?
1,100 inside 8 months, and there's so many of us. I mean, as far as I'm concerned now, if people want me to hear what they're saying, they can either jump or use the phone.
Dara,